Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. It's great to have you here. My name's Jane Bayler, and today I'm with Tim Binns, the A&R director and co-owner of New State Entertainment, which is an independent record label established for over 30 years in the UK. So, Tim, it's great to have you here.
Hola.
Yeah, so in this interview, we're going to talk about the massive changes that have happened in the music industry as a result of the transition from vinyl to streaming and everything in between, because it's been a really big kind of era, I suppose, over the last decade, but actually over the last several decades, really. So I think just to talk about the business of music, what's actually happening now, what are the trends, what are the changes, all of those kind of things. And I think so many people are interested in music. It's really fantastic to have an opportunity just to go behind the scenes and really hear it from a pro, as it were.
Thanks for having me also.
Yeah, it's great. And actually, Tim and I, we know each other in real life as well, don't we, Tim?
Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, okay, let's get into it then. So before we get into talking about the music industry, let's talk about you, Tim. So tell us about your background. How did you start in this industry?
Honestly, I kind of started being a fan of music, like I guess anyone in the music industry really. Being a raver in the sort of mid to late 80s, getting into electronic music like that, and then sort of fell out of university into some jobs that I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go with, and ended up doing a bunch of sort of loosely music related jobs for Wembley Stadium in the ticket office, and our price records, actually working behind the counter, selling records, CDs, tapes, that kind of thing. And then weirdly progressed from there. I answered an ad in the NME for people to review new music for a music industry publication called The Tip Sheet, which was a music industry magazine, weekly magazine, run by music industry Svengali Jonathan King.
Oh yeah.
And from there, I progressed to be the dance editor and the deputy editor, and then got asked to go and work for a UK record label, Chrysalis Records, and their dance music department called Tempo, by a lovely chap called Ken Grunbaum, and he kind of gave me my first job in the music industry, and I did a bit of promotions and A&R scouting and you know the sort of lower junior level stuff. Stayed there for a little while, and then turned up for work one morning and they said, "Sorry Tim, you can't come to the office, you've all been made redundant," which was a
Oh,
bit of a shocker. It's when EMI was going through some massive changes and just downsized kind of like everything really hastily, and kind of didn't know what to do. And obviously I had a bunch of mates who worked in the music industry, and one of those was my business partner Tom, or now business partner Tom, and he was kind of more of a mate at the time, and he did he worked for Telstar Records and did the Sky magazine dance chart at the time, and he was starting a company. He said, "Oh, you know what, why don't you come and do that?" And so we did, and that's where we are still with
yeah.
New State. That's kind of a
Amazing.
potted history.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of your career has been, centered around the whole dance music scene, hasn't it? The
Correct,
rave
yeah.
scene, as it were.
I mean,
So
it's pretty much solely that. There's been a couple of periods when we've done music that's not dance music, but it's mainly electronic music. Yeah.
so, I mean, what impact did that huge kind of rave culture that came out, I suppose it was really the early 90s, wasn't it, when it really kind of hit the mainstream? What impact did that have on the music industry as a whole?
Um, I think at the time no one took it very seriously because it was just like a bunch of people getting off their heads in the field. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like, you know, these records started appearing in the charts because they, you know, got picked up by record labels, and you know, everyone went, "Oh, hang on a minute, maybe there's something in this," and you know, it's hung around since.
Yeah. So you've actually spent quite a lot of time on tour, haven't you, with some quite big names in that industry, haven't you, Tim? You got some stories, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, most of which probably can't be shared here, but
No, I
yeah,
know, I know, I know. I wasn't gonna put you on the
I'm
spot
here
then.
to talk about the music industry, business, really more than anything. You know,
Of
and
course.
um, yeah, I mean, we've worked with a lot of people over the years, like from Tiesto to Paul Oakenfold to Paul Van Dyke. Worked with some of the biggest brands in dance music, especially like Ibiza focused, like Pasha. And then on the UK side, Cream, God's Kitchen. I mean, if you're into electronic music, you'll know what those brands are, and you'll remember those clubs as being seminal clubs. And you know, so a lot of them still are. You know, Cream's still doing Creamfields, biggest UK, maybe European electronic music festival. Obviously, Pasha's still a cornerstone of Ibiza
Mm.
clubbing legend. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, you know, it's been a pretty broad church, but all under the electronic music roof.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the business of music then. So how do people make money in the music industry these days? That's the business of music, right?
With difficulty.
Okay.
I mean, you know, there's a lot of challenges that didn't used to be there,
Okay.
mainly down to margins. You know, the margins on a stream are massively, significantly less than they were on a CD or a piece of vinyl.
Okay.
Uh, and obviously, you know, streaming has kind of democratized the music industry as well. So anyone can literally put out a record now, which, you know, has kind of eroded the quality maybe of some of the music out there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I mean, it's been seismic. You know, when you look at the way that um, we used to sell CDs and vinyl, you know, the margins on a CD, for instance, had a retail price of like 10, 13 quid. You know, the dealer price would be £7 or £8 on that. So, you know, as a label, you're collecting that kind of money on every CD that you sell. Obviously, the pay through to the artist is going to be a percentage of that.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, you look at streams now, and we're talking fractions of pennies.
Mm.
So you know, to actually make the same amount of money, the volume of streams has to increase massively
Mhm.
um, to make up the difference.
And is the volume of streams increasing over, say, for example, people purchasing CDs back in the day?
I don't know. I guess you know the subscriber base for music now may be more. You know, it's apples and oranges really. You know, you've got a one-time purchase of an item that you know once it leaves the shop, you can't track where it goes. You know, someone will take a CD home and they might listen to it 50 times. They might listen to it 50,000 times, but you only get paid once.
Mm.
But with streaming, it's kind of you know, it's the gift that keeps on giving because in theory you should get paid for every time someone listens to it.
Mm.
And I think, as they say in Scotland, many a mickle makes a muckle, or many a muckle makes a mickle. One of the two.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so do the musicians, where do they make their money from? Is it live performances, or are there artists who are making a lot of money from streaming?
I think you can still make money from streaming, but you know, like I said, you know, the volume has to be massive.
Right.
Uh, you know, we're talking hundreds of millions of streams.
Yep.
But I'm going to say that any artist who's doing that kind of level of streaming is actually making more from live music and merchandise than they are from music.
Yep. Okay, so that's really where the money is. Okay, so tell us about your business model, Tim, because you've got a very successful business in New State Entertainment. So what is it that you've done? Because you've been running that business for quite a while, to create the value in that business.
I mean, it's pretty successful as an independent label. It's all
Yeah,
self-funded. We've never taken outside investment. So I guess in that respect, we're still here after nearly 30 years. So yeah, and as the model goes, it's kind of, be realistic and don't overstretch yourselves, and invest in stuff that you know about. So
yeah,
we managed to acquire some catalogs with longevity, and
hmm,
those have some kind of resonance in streaming, but also in kind of like physical world still, where you can do like limited edition physical vinyl releases and the like. But it's mainly through just being careful and investing in stuff that we know about.
yeah. So I mean, it's basically rights based, isn't it? It's sort of holding the rights to the catalog, isn't it? That's where the business model lies. Am I right?
Yeah, correct. It's rights acquisition. I mean, when you
Hmm.
sign a track, you acquire the rights for a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
uh, or in perpetuity, depending on what sort of deal you do. In
Mm.
perpetuity being forever. Um, um, but those kind of deals now are not as predominant as they used to be. That whole kind of like we own your music forever deal was more of a child of like the 80s, 90s, and noughties.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and most artists these days probably do limited term license. But we're lucky in respect that we've got some worldwide in perpetuity repertoire and rights that we own, and like I said, those continue to create revenue via streaming in the background.
Mm. And presumably, if people want to use those tracks, for example, on an advertisement or perhaps a TV program or a movie or something like that, I'm sure that that's another way that they can monetize, right?
Yeah, I mean, sync licenses, which is the actual use of a track in like a TV ad or a movie, have always been around in the music industry, and
Mm.
there's always been an income stream. But now there's so much more content online through Netflix and Amazon Studios and Apple TV, and also adverts running online rather than just on the TV. People need
Mhm.
to use music, and generally, if it's a big campaign, then they'll come and they'll license the tracks that they want to use, and it's an extra revenue stream. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's really interesting, Tim. So, I mean, how, important was it to you to actually specialize in, electronic, dance music, or did you ever think of diversifying into different genres, for example?
We I mean, it's like I said before, stick to what you know. And
Mm,
we know about electronic music, so it was the most logical place to put our money, so to speak. But we have dabbled in other areas. We did a project called Senor Coconut, which I guess it was kind of related to electronic music because it was a guy doing like Latin jazz, bossa nova cover versions of electronic music, and the first album was a whole album of Kraftwerk covers, and it was quite sort of funny and amusing, but also quite hip at the time it came out, and it worked randomly, and we got lucky there, and yeah, so it's you pick your projects basically.
yeah. And you, have spent, some time, producing as well, haven't you, Tim? You do go into the studio a fair bit as well, don't you?
Yeah, but I don't push any buttons. I can't claim to do that at all. That's not my thing. I'm kind of the guy.
Okay.
I'm kind of the guy who sits on the sofa at the back of the studio and goes, "Oh yeah, I like that," or "No, I don't like that." I mean,
Well,
I'm pretty clueless when it comes to actually like engineering. And luckily, we've got a great team of people that we work with regularly who actually know about that, and
mm.
who I trust. So it's yeah. I'm just a pair of ears.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, look, somebody's gotta do it, right? Which is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, but, it's a team effort, but it's not just solely down to me, and,
Yeah.
God, if it was just down to me, we'd have signed some terrible records, I'm sure.
Okay.
Some
And,
people might say we have signed some terrible records, but hey, we like them.
yeah, well, that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so also, because obviously you have a A&R background, for people that don't know what A&R is, how can you, explain that?
Going out, finding artists and signing them, and liaising with them, but then their management to get a product out to market.
Mm,
But because we're a small company, I'm kind of across marketing as well, and
mm.
it's a multitasking role, really.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
like it used to be. You have to kind of have a bit of a grounding in pretty much everything.
Mm. Yeah, in terms of spotting and signing, artists, does your business still do that? Or are you just looking have you just been looking for established artists and established catalogues?
It's a blend. Um, catalogs like I said before are great because there's a proven track record there, and you can model the way that they're going to behave over a number of years. So there's a kind of certainty to that, and we do go out and sign other tracks and one-off singles and try and develop them. But that's it's becoming increasingly harder to do that, and there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, and why is that, Tim?
Volume. There's just a volume of like stuff out
Okay.
there. Creating enough
Saturation.
noise. Yeah, breaking through. Everything's so reliant and driven on social media to a certain extent with TikTok and Instagram, and
Mhm.
that those are big drivers for records that can actually cross over. So you've got a if you're not predominant on one of those platforms, then you've got um, you're in second place already.
Okay.
We do try and sign artists who've got like a social media imprint and they're active on social media, but sometimes that's not enough. And
Right.
you still got the traditional gatekeepers as well at radio and
Mm.
PR press and etc. And then you've got additional gatekeepers at the DSPs, which are the streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple, who editorial um, gatekeepers who control access to playlists on the platforms. So that, you've got a lot of factors to juggle when actually releasing a record these days.
Mm.
A lot more.
That's
So I
very Yeah, that's very interesting. So it's a blend really of all those different people and platforms that you've got to influence. And of course, at the end of the day, the music's got to be good as well, right? I mean, it's not just about the marketing, is it? People have got to pick up on and actually like the music.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And you try and cover the bases by doing different genres, and you put out a house record, you might put out a techno record. It's yeah. I mean, we've also always signed records from the heart, and we do the records that we like. Um, and we can't afford to chase, like checkbook A&R. We can't, we're not Universal or Warner's or Sony, and we haven't got a massive checkbook where we can run down the road chasing the thing that's got a huge trend on TikTok, and it requires hundreds of £1,000s advance. It's not the game that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose some people are into that game, but essentially, by not being in that game, then you become a boutique, really, don't you? You're like
Yeah,
a
I mean,
boutique record.
sadly, the major labels are driven by market share,
Mm.
and they have to do that to keep their market share alive.
Yeah, so
And
that's a different game, isn't it?
it is, yeah. An £80,000 advance on a track is a punt to them, whereas an £80,000 advance for us, that's a lot of money, and
Mm.
it's a big difference.
Yeah, so you mentioned TikTok. So would you say that TikTok is the most influential platform at the moment for emerging artists?
Um, yes.
Ah, really? Yeah, interesting.
I mean, I'm not an expert on TikTok, and I don't claim to be, and I never have. I've actually, we've got a social media person who is more of an expert on TikTok. So I really can't kind of like comment too much on TikTok, but it is a massive driver, though. Yeah, I know that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I see quite a few, musicians on TikTok, and I see people who are obviously trying to make it, and they're working very, very hard at, filming themselves in, singing in different places, and I'm like, there's gotta be a reason why they're doing that, and so now I know.
But it's just about getting as much content out there as you possibly can, and
Yeah.
you know, trying to get your track into the algorithm of whatever platform you're on. Yeah, that's kind of the basis of it.
Yeah. So I mean, let's say, there might be some people listening and maybe they or maybe somebody in their family, maybe their kids or something like that, have aspirations to, to go out there in the music industry and make a success of it as a musician. So what advice would you give them from a business perspective?
Don't give up.
Don't give up. Yeah, always a good piece of advice,
No,
right?
it can be soul destroying for new artists. They like busting a nut, putting loads of content on these social platforms like Instagram and TikTok, and not getting seen, and it can be soul destroying. And
Mm.
they put a record out, they finally get a deal, and put a record out, and it gets 1,000 streams. But it's about persistence, and you know, sadly, because a lot of the digital platforms, music platforms, are algorithmic based. It's
Mm.
about they reward for frequency of release, so it's just about kind of keeping going and keeping releasing your music if you can. And like I've said at the top of the conversation, you don't have to be signed to a label these days to get your music heard. There
Mm.
are distribution platforms like CD Baby, etc., where you can get music out there yourself as an artist, and it has democratized the music industry, and
Mm.
made it a lot easier for people just to get their music out.
I mean, I suppose you could say in many respects it also parallels things like TV where, once upon a time, nobody could become famous unless they were on TV or in a movie or, they had access to those big audiences that were provided by somebody else. But of course, now anybody can set themselves up on TikTok, right? Or YouTube or any of the social media platforms and actually get an audience there. So it's really changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, I
Hugely.
think that's an exact parallel, and it's um, the accessibility levels have definitely increased. It was previously pretty difficult to get a record deal, and like in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of people out there who wanted to release their music but just couldn't get a record deal. And
Mm,
to go and press your own record and sell it into like HMV and Woolworths at the time, and get it into the supermarkets was nigh on impossible because no one would take you seriously.
mm.
uh, but the landscape has changed totally.
Yeah, which really, makes me kind of appreciate it. I think I was talking fairly recently about, a friend of my daughter's, well, I went to see her the other night when she was playing, at the O2, supporting the 1975, so her band's
Oh
called
wow,
Japanese House. Yeah.
amazing.
So, I mean, really, she's done so well, hasn't she? Anybody that gets to that level to play in front of that big audience and really kind of build a very, very loyal following, which she has done. It must have taken a lot to get there.
I mean, I don't know about her specific journey, but I'm
Mm.
guessing did it start with her promoting her own music on social platforms and YouTube, or how did it start? What was the story?
Well, I do
Sorry, I mean,
know that yeah, she started very early. So she started when she was writing her own songs when she was about 8 years old. So I know
yeah,
that much. And so she's been at it for a very, very long time. And
Right.
I think she was very prolific. You know, you mentioned frequency. I think she
Yeah.
writes a lot and she puts a lot out, and I think she just kept on doing it because she'd do it, I think, whether anybody paid her or not. When you think about it, she was doing it as a kid. It's
Yeah.
absolute passion, and I think a lot of people, they have music as a passion. I mean, I'm passionate about music. I really love it. I just don't know how to play it, really. Yeah, just one of those things, really. I think if you've got the passion for anything, then I think if you are that passionate, then you will do it whether there's money in your bank account or not. You'll find a way, won't you? And I think that's what carries people through, really, isn't it?
I think, with music, it's a passion, and you have to have that. And it's similarly when you're running a label, it's a passion project.
Yeah.
Um, and we do it because we love it, and we love the music, and there's a certain element of the lifestyle as well. We love the lifestyle, so it's yeah. There's a lot of different passion elements.
Yeah, and you've traveled all over the world, haven't you, with a lot of artists, and, been to some amazing places, you've met some amazing people. You've had a pretty good life really, haven't you, Tim? The music industry has done you quite well, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Despite the challenges.
it's comfortable. Yeah, I mean, and I've been lucky enough to do a bit of traveling off the back of it. Yeah, for sure. And seen some things. So yeah, I can't complain really.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us tonight. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just drop me an email, tim@newstate.com.
Okay, well, that's easy to remember, isn't it? So that's tim@newstate.com. And if
Yeah, no,
anybody wants to
pretty
yeah,
open. It's a pretty open book, so just reach out. I'm happy to
yeah.
chat to anyone.
That's amazing, and I can definitely say that Tim is an extremely helpful guy, who is very, very nice guy. So if you have any questions about the music industry, about getting started in the music industry,
Thanks.
about, getting your music more successful, then, Tim is the guy to ask. And so, yeah, I mean, look, as I said, it's been a pleasure. What's on the cards for you for the rest of the year, Tim, before we go?
More of the same. We've
Okay.
got a couple of reissues coming up.
Yeah.
It's an anniversary for one of Zero Seven's album. It's Zero Seven are a band that we have as part of the catalogue.
Yeah.
We're working on some remixes for Paul Oakenfold as well. There's a couple of new artists that we're kind of trying to develop as well. And yeah, so the wheels keep turning.
Lots happening. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim. It's been great, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, Jane. Thanks a lot.